Out of Order Gun Rights Podcast, Episode 88.
Welcome to the Out of Order Podcast, your window into the firearms community, exploring those shaping the future of our rights and protecting our lifestyle, laws, legal cases, activism, and self-defense in a candid and honest podcast for our brothers and sisters in arms. Here's your host, James Kalita.
Thanks for tuning in to episode 88 of the Out of Order Gun Rights Podcast. Show notes page for today's episode is outoforderjameskalita.com/88. Today's sponsor is giftforgunnuts.com. Giftforgunnuts.com, where you can get gift ideas for the hunter and firearms enthusiast on your holiday shopping list. Updated daily from now until Christmas. Head to giftforgunnuts.com and see the great gifts. You can also help out the show by using any of the Amazon search bars on the show notes page. Just type in what you're looking for, search there. You'll generate a commission for the show at no additional cost to you. And we also are very fortunate to be sponsored by Liberty Maniacs. Great 2A and Libertarian gear, t-shirts, mugs, all really great stuff. Check that out. And by Liberty Classroom, where they get the history and economics they didn't teach you in high school. Today's guest is Murray Sabrin. Murray is a Libertarian candidate running for the U.S. Senate in the state of New Jersey. And now, here's Murray.
Murray Sabrin, welcome to the show.
Well, thank you, Jim, for inviting me. It's a pleasure being with you.
Thank you. So, Mr. Sabrin, you're running for U.S. Senate on the Libertarian ticket. Would you tell us a little about your campaign?
Well, what happened last year at the in the November Libertarian Party General Meeting, I was asked to consider running for the U.S. Senate, and that was certainly the furthest thing in my mind. So the year passed, and in January, when we came back from vacation, I got an email from the chairman of the LP saying, "Would you consider running?" So my wife and I discussed it. I discussed it with the chairman of the LP. And the vice chairman, and I decided to go ahead with the campaign. And the goal of the campaign is to be competitive, and that's what Libertarian means: getting our message out, getting media exposure, raising enough money to get our message out in conventional media and on social media. And so far, we've been doing quite well, except that the mainstream media have been blocking me out from any discussion of my campaign when they mention the two major parties, which is very frustrating, as you know, from the history of third parties. Unless you come in with your own money, or you can raise money comparable or fairly comparable to the major parties, they don't even want to discuss anything with you. So that's been the most frustrating part of the campaign. And our fundraising has not been up to the goals I set out for us. So that's been a difficult or a challenge as well. So we're coming into the home stretch. The message is resonating, I can tell you that. Everywhere I go, my signature issue is universal credits for donations to nonprofits, which means we could phase out the welfare state as we keep money in New Jersey, keep money in every other state of the union, instead of having this huge welfare bureaucracy in Washington, D.C., which, of course, doesn't provide any services. All they do is collect money, write reports, and don't provide any services, whether it's medical services, whether it's Habitat for Humanity, building homes for people. It's all a big scam in Washington, D.C., of people using the government for job creation, for the welfare state, and they send us a few crumbs in terms of these social programs. So my proposal will strengthen the social service sector in the proven American way, voluntarism. It was called mutual aid societies before the Great Depression. Now they're called nonprofits, and I believe my proposal would solve a lot of the problems around the country without any taxpayer money, but people helping people directly through the nonprofits, which is the way I was brought up to learn that you help people by giving money directly to an organization that does great work in the local community.
Right, the whole idea that that people are giving money because they want to, not because they have to, and they can decide how to best spend, how to best be charitable.
Well, this is the whole point. I mean, charity has been around, goodness gracious, since the colonial times in America, and people at the local level will get together, pool their resources, and help families that maybe had a breadwinner who died, who had a child that needed help, that there was unemployment, or life insurance. All these things were done on a voluntary basis. No one was forced to do anything, and it worked magnificently for hundreds and hundreds of years till the Great Depression came, and now people are looking to Washington to solve all their problems locally. And so I reject that categorically as a libertarian. And from a practical point of view, the great Peter Drucker wrote in the Wall Street Journal in 1991, government has proved incompetent to solve the social problems. What he said we need the nonprofits to be the first line of defense in delivering social services. So I'm taking his analysis, his idea, and making it a campaign issue, because we can't go on forever spending money that we don't have, because we have to. The federal government is borrowing nearly $1 trillion a year, and this is in good economic times. So we've got a real problem in Washington. It's called more money is going out that's coming in, and the money that's coming in is being borrowed, so the national debt is skyrocketing. And as interest rates go up, that means the servicing on the debt goes up, and therefore that, quote, crowds out other sectors of the federal budget. So we need a really do-over in Washington, and I'm prepared to go there and make the case that the way to best have a free society, a prosperous society, and a humane society is through the nonprofit sector, through free enterprise, limited government, and, of course, a non-interventionist foreign policy where all our rights are protected at home, and we don't try to sort out all the divisions and conflicts overseas, because that's not our role in the world.
And so my listeners are predominantly tuned in because they're concerned about firearms and gun rights,
Sure.
and I'm always surprised that every gun owner isn't a libertarian. But for those listening that may not be aware, would you let them know what the libertarian position on firearms is?
Well, we're foremost in favor of individual rights. And those rights are guaranteed to us in the Constitution, in the 10th Amendment. In the 10 amendments. And the Bill of Rights, to me, when I became a U.S. citizen in 1959, I raised my right hand and swore to uphold the Constitution. That means upholding all the rights guaranteed to us. Remember, government doesn't give us rights. Our rights are natural rights according to the Declaration of Independence. These are rights that predated the government, and the purpose of the government is to protect our rights, not to violate our rights. And the right to self-defense, I tell people when I'm on talk shows, is even if the Second Amendment didn't exist, we have the right to self-defense. It's a fundamental human right that you have the right to protect yourself, your family, your business, your residence, and everything else that you hold dear to you. And so I make the point very clear that the right to own a firearm is not only fundamental to us, it's constitutionally protected. And as you know, James, in New Jersey, our Second Amendment rights virtually are non-existent. We can have a firearm in our home, but once you leave your home, it's almost impossible to get a concealed carry permit in the state of New Jersey. And we have to change that. And as a U.S. Senator, how do you change that? That's the challenge, I think, for being a U.S. Senator is the culture here in New Jersey, Connecticut, California, New York State is so much different than the rest of the country, where the right to bear arms, the right to protect yourself, is a given. It's not something that is alien, but there's something about the water, I guess it is, in this area that people are just so fearful of people having the right to use a firearm. And I've been trained. I have as much training as a police officer, because after 9/11, I was trained by a former police officer in the classroom with all the rules and regulations and safety factors that go into safe firearm ownership. And then we spent months and months on a firing range perfecting our skills and doing role playing so we know when to use our firearm and when not to use it. But it's a challenge here in New Jersey where our Second Amendment rights only exist in our home, where we could carry a firearm and not worry about any problem. But my goal as U.S. Senator is to make the case that the right of self-defense is a fundamental human right, and therefore states should think twice about restricting those rights. This is an interesting constitutional issue, James. And I don't know if anyone has brought this up, but if the Constitution of the United States guarantees us the right to bear arms, can the states infringe on them? Of course they have, but I would be interested in possibly putting together a lawsuit with constitutional experts to say, hey, if states are violating our Second Amendment rights, the Supreme Court must side with the firearms owners, because this is our right guaranteed under the Second Amendment. So all the Second Amendment activists in the state of New Jersey and around the country should rally behind my campaign and get out the vote on Election Day, and we can win this thing easily, given the number of firearm owners in the state of New Jersey, because they're probably the largest voting bloc in the state of New Jersey. And if they all come out for the clear best Second Amendment candidate, I will win this thing easily.
And that's something that comes up every time I advocate for a libertarian candidate. The idea out there that, libertarians don't win elections, and so if you vote for a libertarian, you're splitting the vote. What do you say to folks that object that way?
That is probably the most, and I'm trying to be kind here because I hear this all the time. This is probably the most inane analysis of voting in America there is, because the Republican challenger to the incumbent is not a pro-Second Amendment guy. He's never mentioned it in any of his campaign ads. We've been all over Facebook and social media saying, I am the Second Amendment, I will protect your Second Amendment rights. So if you vote for the Republican because historically gun owners have voted for Republican, they're not interested in Second Amendment rights. In fact, the Republican candidate will never go near a firing range. I was in South Jersey at a firing range and practicing my skills at the firing range, and the co-owner of that firing range gave me a wonderful endorsement that you can see at our Facebook website, Murray Sabrin for U.S. Senate. So I'm proud to stand up for the Second Amendment, and I think it's incumbent upon gun owners to stand up for the candidate that stands up for gun owners, firearm owners. So the notion that splitting the vote, you have to earn your votes with the people. There's no such thing as splitting the vote. You have to earn every single vote you get because people trust you, that you're telling the truth, that you stand for liberty, you stand for freedom, you stand for the Constitution, you stand for limited government, you stand for a peaceful world, which I think the president wants to accomplish. So I believe I am with the majority of the American people of peace, liberty, and prosperity, our campaign slogan. And the way you do that, James, is you have people come out to vote for you instead of the self-fulfilling prophecy that if they vote for the Libertarian, it's somehow going to split the vote. No, you vote for the Libertarian candidate because they represent your values, and if you value your values, you'll vote for the Libertarian Party candidate.
Thank you. So earlier on, you mentioned that the struggles you're facing getting the message out. Where can people find your message? How can they spread the message?
Sure. It's SabrinForSenate.com is our website, and we're all over Facebook. We have a great social media team. And I just posted on Facebook yesterday of how we can win this race without spending multi-millions of dollars that the other candidates will spend. And it's very simple arithmetic, James, and I wish people would listen very carefully of how a libertarian can win in the state of New Jersey and, quite frankly, in every other state of the Union. Here's how we win on Election Day. We need 2,000 platoon leaders, to use a military analogy. 2,000 platoon leaders. That's roughly 100 per county. There are 21 counties in the state of New Jersey. Some counties are larger, like Bergen County and Passaic County and Middlesex County. So an average of 100 platoon leaders in each county. That would give us 100 platoon leaders times 20 would give us 2,000 platoon leaders. They, in turn, would have to recruit 9 other members of the community. So we would have 20,000 platoon members around the state out of 5.8 million registered voters. Those 20,000, which I call Strong for Sabrin, platoon members around the state, would have to get 50 people to the polls on Election Day. That's 1 million votes. 20,000 times 50, that's 1 million votes. Everybody can influence 50 people to get to the polls. That's family, friends, neighbors, business associates, customers, clients, you name it. And we have flyers that people could use that shows my Second Amendment position, my limited government position, my conservative position, all the positions that I think the mainstream of the American people like, because it's based upon fundamental common sense. We have the right to be free. That's what the Constitution guarantees us. That's what the Declaration of Independence, our founding document, said. We have the inalienable right to life, liberty, and pursuit of happiness. Therefore, the government has to respect our fundamental rights, and I intend to go to Washington and protect those rights from both Republicans and Democrats, because they've been chipping away at our rights in my lifetime, which is quite a long lifetime now, since I became U.S. citizen in '59, and since the 100 years of progressive politics of both left and right, Republicans and Democrats in Washington. So we have a real challenge because I think we only have one party, the Washington Party, made up of two wings, Republicans and Democrats, and all they do is fight with each other, but they still support big spending, big government overseas. They chip away our constitutional rights, and this is what concerns me because I don't want to live in a society where our rights keep on chipping away, and when we're long gone, James, if things continue, most of our rights will be gone 10, 20, 40, 50 years from now. And no one can tell me today that our rights will be there for future generations. No one can predict that because no one can predict that we won't be an authoritarian society 10, 20, 50 years down the road. And so what I want to do is make sure we can safeguard all the rights that we now have and not allow anybody who comes into office issuing executive orders, or you have a Congress and a president that's wanting to get rid of our constitutional rights. So we have a big challenge ahead of us, and that's why we need to start right here in New Jersey by creating a political upheaval by saying we're going to elect the first libertarian to the United States Senate, and he's going to stand up to the big government types on both sides of the aisle. And this would be a game changer, I think, for the country, because once you can elect one libertarian member of Congress, you will elect more. And the more libertarians we have in Congress, the more they'll stand up for the people's rights. And if you think the Republicans or the Democrats are going to protect our rights, you're totally mistaken. And this is why I get so frustrated when people say what you just articulated, that I'm splitting the vote. I'm not splitting anyone's vote. I'm earning every vote I get, and we're going to earn the votes of enough people to come out to vote for us that we can win this thing. And that's what's so exciting about this campaign, is that with very little financial resources, we can win. But the way we can get resources in is if we can get 20,000 members of our platoons around the state, and they each come up with $20, James, which today is no money. That's 400,000. We will dominate radio and television the last few weeks of this campaign with our message. And once people hear the message, when I speak in person to young people, to college students, to seniors about the message, they like the message because they know it comes not because of pandering to anybody, because it's well thought out and it's consistent with who we are as a nation, consistent with our Constitution, consistent with our Bill of Rights. And when people realize that I'm not beholden to any special interest, all they want is to get more money from Washington, I want most of that money coming back to the people in terms of tax cuts and downsize the federal government so we don't have these massive budget deficits anymore, and we can get our fiscal house in order, because we have a mess in Washington with a $21 trillion debt that's going to increase at $1 trillion at least a year for the next 10 years or more. So we have a blooming financial crisis, and if we don't start to address it, I don't want to become Greece. I don't want to become Venezuela, which Venezuela, as you know, is collapsing before our eyes because the government there is the most socialist in the world, and they've just printed a bunch load of money, and that's causing the currency to collapse and the economy to implode. So we're a long way from that, but the point is Germany in the 1920s collapsed because they were printing up money, and they were a industrialized, sophisticated economy. So the fact that countries around the world have imploded, even though they've had similar structures like we have, a market economy with heavy investment in capital goods, this could implode very easily if they make mistakes in Washington. And when I first learned about this in the late 60s, early 70s, right out of college, the key to unraveling when this thing is going to implode is the U.S. dollar, because the U.S. dollar is now the international monetary reserve currency. And if people start unloading dollars, then it's checkmate. Then we have to put our financial house in order. If people don't buy our debt overseas, the interest rates will have to be sky high for the U.S. Treasury to float the debt. So we have all these things in the background that could blossom next year, the year after, the year after that. Who knows when it's going to happen? It really comes to confidence. And we don't know when people's confidence overseas, domestically, will decline to such a degree where people will withdraw their support for the U.S. government's debt and the U.S. Government's currency, the U.S. dollar, and that's when we will have a real big problem in this country.
So what what happened in your life that led you to libertarianism? Did you?
Oh, this is a great question because I'll give you my journey. We came here in 1949. My parents were the only ones in their families to survive the Holocaust. I was 2.5 years old. And growing up, we didn't have any grandparents. I said, where's our grandparents? Where's our uncles and aunts? So my parents told me what happened during World War II and how they were miraculously able to survive. And my father, I'm looking at a picture of my father on a plaque that he gave me with his machine gun from World War II. He was a commander in Poland of 240 people from July 43 to July 44. And he was able to survive and drive the Nazis out of Poland with the help of the Russian army that came from the east and drove the Nazis out of Poland. So growing up, I sort of was leaning very carefully that big government is really bad, especially the type of government that occurred in Europe with Germany. So totalitarianism is of course evil. And then growing up, my father was a Democrat when he became a citizen, so I became a Democrat. And then I got very uncomfortable with the Great Society and the Vietnam War in the 60s. And the more I looked into it as a college student, the more I realized this is not going to end well. And so, of course, I started reading about history, about economics, about finance, about politics. And I came across libertarian literature, and I said, this is it. This is how the country was founded: liberty, limited government, a non-interventionist foreign policy, free enterprise. And that was the beginning of my journey to a full-fledged libertarian in the early 70s. And I've been trying to promote these ideas first to the Republican Party, which has been a total disaster in New Jersey, and then now as a Libertarian candidate for U.S. Senate. It's people in New Jersey remember I was a Libertarian Party candidate for governor in 1997, and some of the things we did came to fruition, namely deregulating auto insurance, raising the speed limit to 65. Free speech rights. I was accused of violating the town ordinance where I lived at the time with a political sign. We went to court, and the judge said this is a violation of free speech rights. You're allowed to put a political sign in your own lawn. So we made some inroads, but not enough to make New Jersey better for future generations. And now we're sitting with a huge unfunded liability for pension obligations in New Jersey. So the politicians on both sides of the aisle have messed things up in New Jersey. On both sides of the aisle, they've messed up things in Washington, D.C. So basically, it's libertarianism versus some form of socialism, the type of socialism we have in Washington, which both parties buy into. They buy into big government programs, which are not authorized by the Constitution. And so as a libertarian, someone who believes in liberty, someone who believes in individual rights, someone who believes in the fundamental decency of human beings, and that people should be treated with respect, and if you're a criminal, you should be taken off the streets, and if you're a legal immigrant and you commit a crime, you should be deported. And so as an immigrant, I'm very much in favor of immigration if it's done properly, like we did in 1949. My parents got permission or papers for sponsorship to come to America, and that's how we built a life in America. It's not you come in the front door because you want to come here, but we should have a process, and if you don't follow that process, you're basically snubbing your nose at the American people, saying you want to come here, and if you need assistance, the American taxpayer should pick up that tab. I reject that categorically. We didn't get any government welfare when we came here. As far as I remember, my father got a job. We got some assistance through a private social service agency, and that's the way we got started in America. And so that's the model we should have for immigration. The problem is we have so many people who've come here illegally that it's going to be hard to sort this all out. But my proposal is if people are here, they've been working, they've been building businesses, they can't become citizens because they jumped ahead of the line, so they have what I call permanent resident status. They have all the same rights as American citizens, but they don't have full citizenship rights, and that probably would mean that they don't have the ability to vote. But if they're legal, if they're working hard, build up businesses, we shouldn't have a problem with that. The problem is we have illegal immigration that doesn't seem to stop, and that's why we should bring the troops home and maybe station them at the southern border and make sure that people are following our rules to come into the country.
Well, let's just say that I always ask my guests if there are books that they recommend that that all gun owners should read. Any come to mind about either politics or liberty or firearms?
Oh, there's so many. Anything by Murray Rothbard, which you can find on Mises.org. Professor Rothbard was a member of my dissertation committee when I was at Rutgers. He was an outside member when he was teaching in New York City. Anything by Professor Rothbard would be great. Henry Hazlitt, Lou Rockwell, Hans Hermann Hoppe, Tom DiLorenzo. Just go to LouRockwell.com, go to Mises.org, MISES.org. There's one book that every gun owner should read, and it's a magnificent little monograph, first published in France, but it's available in English online, Bastiat.org, BASTIAT.org, and that is the law. And that explains what the law should be, and the law should protect individual rights. That's it. Your fundamental rights, your God-given rights of life, liberty, and property, and those are the things that the government should protect. And once goes beyond that, then the government has basically turned its back, or the government officials have turned their back on what their job should be, was to protect us from criminals, to protect us from possible invasion, and just leave us alone. Let us sort out our own affairs. Let us have voluntary arrangements with people across our country, across the world. And that, to me, was one of the most important books I've ever read, The Law by Frederick Bastiat. It's probably the best short monograph of liberty and therefore libertarianism, even though I don't think they used the term back then. But he wrote this book in response to the socialists that were trying to rile up the people for socialism in the mid-19th century. And Bastiat just demolished the whole notion of socialism in this little monograph. You could probably read it in one afternoon. It's that short, it's that fast to read. It's probably the most influential book in my life. Also, Henry Hazlitt, Economics in One Lesson, Rothbard's For a New Liberty. All this is available on the internet for free, which is so wonderful about the internet. You can now become educated and have the material to defend yourself against the socialists and the progressives who think all the answers are in Washington, D.C. See, the problem, James, with the progressives is they want to replace the establishment with themselves as the establishment and rule over the people. Libertarians want to leave people alone to find their way in the world using peaceful means to achieve their goals. That is the essence of a free society, and the essence of a free society is life, liberty, and property, and the right to protect those principles with a firearm if you so desire. If you want to be a pacifist, you can be a pacifist. No one's forcing you to own a firearm. But if you want to own a firearm, you have that absolute right, and you should be able to go in public and defend yourself. We can talk about how you should be vetted in order to go in public and have a firearm. I have no problem of background checks, which make sure that you're of sound mind and sound body and know how to use it. Maybe have a training course or two to show that just as we have a driving test, you have to show that you're a competent driver for a motor vehicle. Well, we have the same thing for a firearm. I understand people's concerns, so let's follow some common sense procedures that people can exercise their Second Amendment rights.
Well, I thank you very much for being on the show, and any parting words for our listeners?
Well, I hope everyone goes to SabrinForSenate.com. On the top, there's a tab saying Contact Us, and then you can go to Volunteer for the Campaign. And we want the gun owners to be platoon leaders. Gun owners are leaders. They're the ones that understand the Constitution. And if we get 2,000 of them, platoon leaders around the state, they recruit 9 others. We can get this from the firearms community in the state of New Jersey, because there are hundreds of thousands of firearm owners who, if they went to the polls this November, they could elect me in the landslide. So SabrinForSenate.com. Follow us on Facebook at Murray Sabrin for U.S. Senate. Follow us on Twitter. And what we could do this election day is really begin the process of restoring our constitutional rights. It starts here in New Jersey, and it spreads throughout the country for the next decade. And before you know it, we will have a constitutional America instead of this wishy-washy America where people come up with all sorts of rights that are not in the Constitution. So with your help, James, with people around the state, 2,000 platoon leaders who recruit 9 people, we get 20,000 platoon members. They give us $20 a pop. We got 400,000 to get our message out to and bypass the mainstream media. And we get the vote out from now to Election Day. And Election Day, if we get 1 million votes, we win this election easily.
Thank you very much for being on the show, and I look forward to talking to you again soon.
Thank you, James. Appreciate it. And if everyone rallies together, we will have a great victory on Election Day. So thank you very much.
Thanks again for tuning in to episode 88 of the Out of Order Gun Rights Podcast. Please head over to the show notes page, outoforderjameskalita.com/88, and you'll find links to the websites we talked about with Murray, and to the books we talked about, and to our sponsors, Liberty Maniacs and Liberty Classroom. Of course, please remember to visit giftforgunnuts.com for all of your firearms and hunting enthusiast holiday shopping needs. Out of Order, James Kalita. Thanks for listening. We'll see you next time.